She mocked her human husband as weak. Until he faced an army alone, Kara was a warrior from the Vierxian Empire, a race known for their strength and skill in battle. She had lived her entire life in a world of power, where only the strongest survived. She was tall, with broad shoulders and piercing yellow eyes that seemed to see through everything. Her muscles were sculpted from years of intense training, and her presence commanded respect. In the Vierxian culture, power was everything, and it was clear to everyone who met her that she was a force to be reckoned with. Ethan, her human husband, was nothing like her. He was smaller, more fragile, and lacked the same physical prowess that defined the Vierxian people. He was once a soldier, but after a traumatic experience during a battle years ago, he chose a quieter life. Now he spent most of his days tinkering with old machines, lost in his own thoughts. The strength that Kara saw in him when they first met had slowly faded, replaced by doubt and hesitation. Every day, Kara reminded him of his weaknesses. She mocked him for his inability to keep up with her in combat. She would laugh when he failed to lift heavy objects or run long distances. To her, Ethan was just a human, weak, fragile, and not made for the battlefield. She would often tell him, "You can't even keep up with me. You're lucky I love you, or you'd be left behind." Ethan hated hearing those words. It wasn't just the mockery that hurt him, it was the truth behind it. He wasn't strong enough to keep up with Kara. She was always the one who fought, always the one who led. He had once been a part of that world, fighting side by side with soldiers, but now he couldn't even get through a day without feeling weak. The house they lived in was grand, with high ceilings and elegant furniture, but it felt empty. It was as if the walls themselves reflected the distance that had grown between them. Ethan would sit in the living room, lost in his thoughts, while Kara would train or go on missions. She was always gone, off to fight, while he stayed behind, feeling more useless with each passing day. Ethan tried to fill the emptiness with distractions. He'd work on his machines, trying to fix old technology, hoping to find a sense of purpose. But it never worked. Every time he picked up a tool, he was reminded of what he used to be, a soldier, a warrior. Now he was nothing more than a shadow of his former self. The war had taken more from him than just his strength. It had taken his confidence, his will to fight. Sometimes he would watch Kara as she prepared for her missions, her eyes focused and determined. He admired her strength, but it only made him feel smaller. He wished he could be more like her, strong, confident, fearless. But every time he tried, it felt like a reminder that he could never measure up. One evening, as Kara was getting ready to leave for another mission, Ethan couldn't take it anymore. He stood in front of her, his voice shaking. "Kara, I'm trying, I really am. But it's never enough for you." Kara glanced at him, her expression cold. "You're right, it's never enough. You're human, Ethan. You'll never be strong like me. You'll never be strong like the Vierxians." Her words stung, but Ethan didn't argue. He couldn't. There was too much truth in them. He turned away and walked to the window, staring out at the stars. Kara didn't seem to notice his pain. She never did. She was used to being the strongest, the best. She didn't understand what it was like to feel weak, to feel like you didn't belong. Ethan's heart sank. He knew that Kara loved him, but he also knew that she didn't see him as an equal. She saw him as something less, something to protect, something to coddle. But Ethan didn't want protection. He wanted to be strong. He wanted to stand beside her, not behind her. He thought back to the times when they were first married, when he had been full of hope and ambition. Back then, he believed he could keep up with her. He believed he could be her equal, but now it seemed like a distant dream. The more he tried to prove himself, the more Kara's mockery seemed to confirm his worst fears, that he would never be enough for her. Kara had always been the warrior, the protector. She had fought countless battles, won countless wars. She was a hero in her own right, a legend among her people. And Ethan? He was just a man, a human, weak and fragile. As Kara left for her mission, she didn't look back. Ethan stood there, staring out at the stars, feeling more alone than ever. He had always thought that love could overcome anything, but now he wasn't so sure. Could love really bridge the gap between them? Could he ever become the man she wanted him to be? Or was he doomed to live in her shadow forever? Ethan didn't know the answer, but as the door closed behind Kara, he made a silent promise to himself. He would find a way to prove his worth. He would find a way to show her that he was more than just a weak human. He would find a way to stand beside her as her equal. But it wouldn't be easy. It would take more than just physical strength. It would take something deeper, something that no alien warrior could ever understand. It would take the strength of the human spirit, the strength to keep going, even when everything seemed impossible. The war that had been brewing in the galaxy for years finally reached Earth. It wasn't just another skirmish or a minor battle. This time, it was different. The Vierxian Empire, once an ally of humanity, had begun to fracture. A rogue faction, led by an ambitious and power-hungry general named Kaldar, had decided that the time had come to assert their dominance over Earth and its colonies. Their goal was simple: to enslave humanity and make Earth part of the Vierxian Empire once and for all. The news came in the form of an emergency broadcast, loud and clear across every communication channel. It wasn't just a warning, it was an announcement of war. Kaldar had declared his intentions, and he wasted no time in making his move. He had already launched an invasion, and Earth's defenses were struggling to hold up. Kara had been sent on a mission to another planet. She wasn't there when the news broke. Instead, she was far away, leading a small task force in a remote sector of the galaxy. Kara's presence was sorely missed back on Earth. The military was in disarray, unable to react fast enough. Their most skilled warriors were either away on assignments or already fighting in other parts of the galaxy. It was a crisis, and Earth's defenders were severely outnumbered. Ethan sat in his workshop, his hands deep inside an old console, fixing something that didn't really matter. The hum of machinery was a familiar sound, something that calmed his mind and kept his thoughts from wandering too much. He hadn't been part of the military for years, ever since the war had taken everything from him. He couldn't bring himself to fight anymore. The pain of losing friends, of watching his comrades fall, had broken him in ways that words couldn't explain. He had tried to move on, to live a quiet life. But today, as the emergency broadcast blared through the room, he couldn't ignore the call for help. Earth was under attack, and the man who had once been a soldier, no, the man who was still a soldier deep inside, felt something stir within him. The time for hiding was over. The military tried to rally the remaining troops, but it wasn't enough. They needed more than just soldiers, they needed leaders. Ethan's name was pulled from the archives, his service record pulled from the past. They called him up, urging him to come back to fight once again, but Ethan hesitated. Could he really do this again? Could he face the horrors of battle after everything that had happened? For hours he sat in his workshop, his mind racing. He thought about Kara. He thought about the mockery, the way she had belittled him. He thought about the pain she caused him with her words. He wasn't sure if she would even care if he went. She had always seen him as weak, as someone who needed her protection, but he wasn't that man anymore. He couldn't afford to be. Finally, after much internal struggle, Ethan stood up, his decision made. He didn't need anyone's approval. He didn't need Kara's validation. He was going to fight for Earth, for the people, and most importantly, for himself. The battle was coming, and he was going to face it head-on. The battle started faster than anyone had anticipated. The Vierxian forces were massive, their ships appearing on the horizon like dark clouds. The humans had only a small defense force to counter them, and it wasn't nearly enough. The Vierxians didn't care about diplomacy or peace talks. They were here to conquer, to destroy, and to claim Earth for their own. Ethan joined the ragtag group of soldiers that had been thrown together in haste. There was no time for training or planning. They were handed weapons and told to fight. The soldiers were scared, unsure of what was to come. They had never faced an army like the Vierxians, and the thought of fighting them was terrifying. But Ethan wasn't scared. He had faced the worst the galaxy had to offer before, and he wasn't going to back down now. He was assigned to lead a small platoon, a group of soldiers who had no experience in combat. Their weapons were outdated, their training minimal, but Ethan didn't care. He had a plan, something that could give them a fighting chance. As the first wave of Vierxian soldiers landed on Earth, chaos erupted. The soldiers didn't know where to go or what to do, but Ethan's calm and clear instructions cut through the panic. He guided them, one step at a time, taking advantage of every advantage the terrain provided. He knew that victory wouldn't come from brute force. It would come from strategy, from knowing how to use the environment to their benefit. They held their ground, fighting off the Vierxians with everything they had. Ethan's leadership and ingenuity quickly became apparent. He knew how to read the battlefield, how to adapt to changing circumstances. His soldiers, once terrified and unsure, began to trust him. They followed his every command, knowing that he was their best chance at survival. Hours passed. The battle raged on, and Earth's forces began to gain ground. But just as victory seemed within reach, the Vierxian general, Kaldar, arrived on the battlefield. His ship descended like a giant predator swooping down on its prey. He was a massive figure towering over the soldiers, his armor a terrifying sight. His reputation preceded him. He was ruthless, cold, and unbeatable. Ethan knew this was his moment. The general had come to take control, to end the fight, but Ethan wasn't about to let that happen. He gathered his platoon and charged toward Kaldar, knowing that if they didn't stop him now, the battle would be lost. The fight that ensued was brutal. Kaldar was stronger, faster, and more experienced, but Ethan was relentless. He refused to give up, refused to let Earth fall into the hands of the Vierxians. The fight between Ethan and Kaldar was intense. They were evenly matched in some ways, Kaldar's physical strength against Ethan's intelligence and determination. But Ethan had something Kaldar didn't. He had the heart of a human, a never-give-up attitude that refused to accept defeat. As the battle continued, Kara, who had been unaware of Ethan's actions, arrived back on Earth, her heart racing with fear. She had heard the reports. Earth was losing and Ethan was on the front lines. She had to find him. When she finally caught sight of him, leading his soldiers in the fight, her heart skipped a beat. She had always seen him as weak, but now she saw something different. She saw strength not in his muscles, but in his heart. Ethan wasn't just fighting for Earth, he was fighting for himself. He was proving that he was more than just a man, he was a force to be reckoned with. As she watched him take down Kaldar, the Vierxian general falling to his knees before him, she felt a rush of emotions. She had underestimated him, mocked him, and doubted him. But now, standing in front of her was a man who had proven her wrong. He had faced an army alone and emerged victorious. The battle that had started so violently began to slow down, but not without leaving a heavy toll. Ethan stood amidst the wreckage of the battlefield, his hands covered in the dirt and blood of the fight. The Vierxians had been defeated, but the victory felt hollow. His soldiers, the ones who had fought alongside him, were exhausted. Many were injured, some were dead. Earth had narrowly survived, but the cost had been high. Ethan looked over the battlefield, his heart heavy. He had done what needed to be done, but it wasn't the victory he had imagined. His mind kept returning to the fight with General Kaldar. He had won, yes, but what did it mean? The war wasn't over. There would be more battles to fight, more enemies to face. And the hardest fight of all was yet to come. He had to prove that the human spirit, the thing that made humanity different from every other species, was worth something. As the sun began to set over the ruined battlefield, Ethan saw Kara approach. She was wearing her Vierxian battle armor, her face set in its usual stoic expression. But something was different now. There was a softness in her eyes, a respect that hadn't been there before. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. He wasn't sure if it was relief, exhaustion, or something else, but seeing her there made the weight of the battle feel a little lighter. Kara stopped in front of him. She didn't say anything at first, just looked at him. Ethan didn't know what to expect. He had expected her to be proud, to give him some form of praise for his leadership. But instead, she simply stood there watching him. Her gaze was different now. There was no mockery in it, no judgment, just quiet understanding. "You were amazing today," Kara said softly, breaking the silence. Her voice was different too. There was no sarcasm, no prideful edge, just honesty. "I never thought you had it in you." Ethan didn't know what to say. Her words were kind, but they weren't the ones he had imagined. He had expected her to tell him how strong he was, how proud she was of him. Instead, she had simply acknowledged the truth. He had proven himself, not for her, not for anyone else, but for himself. "I had to," Ethan replied quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "I had to show that we're not weak, not anymore, not ever again." Kara nodded, understanding the weight of his words. She had always seen herself as the strong one, the one who led and protected. But today she had seen Ethan in a new light. He wasn't the man she had thought him to be. He was more than just a man. He was a leader, a warrior in his own right, and he had shown her that strength didn't come from physical power alone. It came from heart, from courage, from the will to fight when everything seemed lost. For the first time in their relationship, Kara felt a deep sense of pride in Ethan. She had always been the one to protect him, but now she saw that he could protect himself, and more importantly, protect others. He had fought not just for survival, but for the future of humanity. As they stood there in the fading light, surrounded by the wreckage of war, Kara reached out and placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder. The gesture was simple, but it spoke volumes. She had never thought of him as an equal, but now she did. She saw the man who had stood up to the strongest of the Vierxians and won. She saw the man who had faced an army and come out victorious. She saw the strength in him that she had never recognized before. Ethan looked at her, his expression weary but determined. He knew that the battle was far from over. This was just one victory in a much larger war. But for the first time in a long time, he felt like he was ready for whatever came next. He wasn't the man he had been before, broken, uncertain, and weak. He had risen from the ashes of his past and become something greater, something stronger. "I never thought I'd see the day," Kara said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I'm glad I did." Ethan didn't know how to respond. He simply nodded, accepting the moment. There was no need for words now. They had both come a long way, from the man who had felt worthless to the warrior who had saved Earth, and from the woman who had mocked him to the one who now stood beside him, equal in every way. As they walked back to the command center together, Kara by his side, Ethan felt something shift inside him. The world had always been about strength, about power. But now he knew that there was more to it than that. Strength wasn't just about muscle or might. It was about the courage to stand up when everything seemed impossible. It was about the will to fight for what mattered, no matter the cost. Ethan had faced his demons, fought his battles, and proven that humanity had a place in this galaxy. He wasn't weak. He wasn't the man he had once been. He was something more now, something that even Kara, the greatest warrior of her people, couldn't deny. The days that followed the battle were filled with quiet tension. The world had seen Ethan in a new light, but the war was far from over. Despite the victory, the Vierxian Empire still had its eyes on Earth, and the rogue factions that had tried to overthrow humanity weren't finished yet. Kaldar, the general Ethan had defeated, was only one part of a much larger threat. The fight for Earth's future had only just begun. Ethan felt the weight of responsibility heavier than ever. His role as a leader had solidified, but so had the challenges. Earth's military had rallied behind him, but the soldiers he commanded were still recovering from the fight. Their spirits were high, but their strength was waning. The days of peace seemed far off. Kara had stayed by Ethan's side since the battle. She had always been the one to fight, but now she was in uncharted territory. She was used to commanding respect through strength, but here, among the humans, she had to learn what it meant to lead differently. Ethan had shown her that strength wasn't just about physical power. It was about heart, conviction, and the ability to stand up for what was right, no matter the odds. Their bond, once strained and uncertain, had shifted. It wasn't perfect, but it was stronger than before. There were no longer any walls between them. Kara had come to see Ethan not as a fragile human, but as an equal, a partner in every sense. But while the two of them had grown closer, Earth's situation had not improved. Every day, the Vierxians launched new attacks, each one more dangerous than the last. They had learned from their previous failures and were coming at Earth from all sides. It seemed like Earth was facing a never-ending onslaught. One evening, as the sun began to set, Kara and Ethan stood together on a balcony overlooking the city. The skies were still streaked with the smoke of recent battles. The planet had been battered, but it wasn't broken. Not yet. Kara stood silently next to Ethan, her eyes scanning the horizon. "We can't keep fighting like this," Kara said, her voice heavy with the weight of everything they had faced. "We need to strike back, hit them hard." Ethan nodded, knowing she was right. They had to find a way to take the fight to the Vierxians before it was too late. But he wasn't sure how. The humans didn't have the resources, the firepower, or the numbers to go up against the Vierxian military head-on. "We don't need to fight them the way they fight us," Ethan said, turning to face her. "We need to be smarter, we need to outthink them." Kara looked at him, her expression thoughtful. "What do you mean?" "We don't need to defeat their armies in battle," Ethan said. "We need to take out their leadership. If we cut off the head, the body will fall." Kara's eyes widened slightly as she considered his words. "You want to go after their leaders?" "Yes. If we take down the Vierxian High Command, their forces will lose direction. They'll be scattered, disorganized. Without leadership, they won't be able to coordinate their attacks, and that will give us the chance we need to push them back." It was a risky plan, but it was the only option they had. They couldn't keep fighting a war of attrition. The longer the battle dragged on, the more Earth would suffer. They needed to end it, fast. Over the next few days, Ethan and Kara worked together to form a plan. They would need to infiltrate the Vierxian capital deep within their home system. It wasn't going to be easy. The Vierxian Empire was heavily guarded, and the capital was nearly impossible to breach. But if they could make it past the defenses and into the heart of the Empire, they could strike a devastating blow. Ethan knew that this was their best chance. But he also knew it could cost them everything. If they failed, Earth would fall. There was no turning back. The night before the mission, as the final preparations were being made, Kara found Ethan alone in the command center. He was reviewing the mission details, his mind focused on the task at hand. But when he looked up and saw her, something shifted in him. She wasn't just his partner anymore. She was his equal, someone he trusted with everything. "I never thought I'd see the day," Kara said, her voice soft as she stepped closer. "But here we are." Ethan smiled, though the weight of the upcoming mission made it difficult. "We've come a long way." Kara placed a hand on his shoulder, a rare gesture of comfort. "You've changed, Ethan. You've become the leader we needed, the leader I needed." Ethan met her gaze, his eyes full of resolve. "I couldn't have done it without you. I couldn't have come this far without your help." Kara nodded. "We make a good team." They both knew that this mission would be their most dangerous yet, but they were ready. The strength they had found in each other had given them the courage to face the impossible, and no matter what happened, they would face it together. The next day, they left for the Vierxian capital, taking a small team of soldiers with them. The journey was long, and the tension was high. They had no guarantees that they would succeed, no certainty that they would make it back alive. But they couldn't afford to think about failure. The future of Earth depended on them. When they finally reached the Vierxian homeworld, they were met with fierce resistance. The Vierxians had fortified their planet like no other, and every step they took toward the capital was met with danger. But Ethan and Kara didn't hesitate. They moved forward with purpose, their minds focused on the mission ahead. After days of intense fighting, they finally reached the heart of the Vierxian Empire. The High Command was housed in a massive fortress, its walls impenetrable and its defenses unyielding. But Ethan and Kara had come prepared. They infiltrated the fortress using stealth, taking out guards and avoiding detection at every turn. When they finally reached the command center, they faced the Vierxian leaders, the most powerful beings in the galaxy. It was a tense standoff, one that would decide the fate of the entire war. The fortress loomed before them, its towering walls almost touching the sky. The air felt heavy with anticipation, as if the very planet was holding its breath. Ethan and Kara stood side by side, looking up at the massive structure that housed the Vierxian High Command. The journey had been long, and the battles to get here had been brutal. Now they were on the edge of something bigger. They had come this far, and there was no turning back. Inside the fortress, the Vierxian leaders waited, unaware that Ethan and Kara were so close. Their security was tight, their defenses nearly impenetrable. But they had underestimated humanity, and they had underestimated Ethan. The plan they had put together, a mix of stealth and strategy, was their only chance. They had to strike hard, fast, and with precision. Ethan's heart raced as they moved through the darkened halls of the fortress. Every corner, every shadow could hide an enemy, but they didn't stop. They kept moving, staying low, relying on the training they had honed together. Kara was by his side, silent but focused. Her presence gave him strength, a steady reminder that they were in this together. They reached the heart of the fortress, a massive, high-tech control room that was heavily guarded. The room was lined with screens showing the movements of Vierxian forces across the galaxy. This was the command center. This was where the future of humanity would be decided. Ethan nodded to Kara, signaling her to take the left flank. He moved right, his pulse quickening as he prepared for what was to come. The guards were stationed at their posts, but they didn't see them coming. One by one, they fell quietly and without a sound. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest, but his mind was sharp. He had done this before, but never like this. This was different. This was for Earth. As they neared the control center, they could hear the voices of the Vierxian leaders. They were discussing the next phase of the invasion, how they would crush humanity once and for all. The arrogance in their voices was undeniable. They truly believed they were invincible, that nothing could stop them, but Ethan knew better. He had faced impossible odds before, and each time he had come out on top. Now was no different. They were about to show the Vierxians that humanity was far from weak. Ethan and Kara breached the final door, and the room fell silent. The Vierxian leaders looked up in shock, seeing two humans standing in front of them, armed, determined, and ready. The High Command, led by an imposing figure named Vroth, stared at them in disbelief. His eyes narrowed as he took in the sight of the humans who had made it this far. "You're brave to come here," Vroth said, his voice cold and commanding. "But this is the end of your journey." Ethan stepped forward, his gaze unwavering. "No," he said firmly. "This is the end of yours." Without hesitation, he threw a small device onto the floor. It activated with a bright flash, blinding the Vierxians for a split second. In that moment, Ethan and Kara moved. They took out the guards swiftly and efficiently, but they knew that taking down the leaders would be the real challenge. Vroth roared in anger as he stood, his massive frame looming over them. He was faster than any human, his alien strength far beyond anything Ethan had ever faced. But Ethan didn't flinch. He had trained for this, not just physically but mentally. He knew how to outthink his opponents, and this time he wasn't going to rely on brute force. Kara took the lead, her combat skills as sharp as ever. She engaged Vroth, using her speed and agility to counter his raw power. The two clashed in a storm of blows, but Kara held her ground. Ethan, meanwhile, worked quickly to disable the other Vierxian commanders. He knew that if they could neutralize their leadership, the rest of the Vierxian forces would fall apart. The battle raged on for what felt like an eternity, each strike and counterstrike pushing them to their limits. But in the end, it was Ethan's quick thinking that tipped the scales. He used the environment to his advantage, tricking Vroth into overextending, and then using the opening to land a decisive blow. With a roar of frustration, Vroth collapsed to the ground, defeated. The control room fell silent. The Vierxian leaders were no more. The rest of their forces would scatter, leaderless and disorganized. The victory was theirs. Kara stood over Vroth's fallen body, breathing heavily, but with a look of satisfaction on her face. She turned to Ethan, a smile breaking across her face for the first time in what felt like forever. "We did it," she said, her voice filled with relief. Ethan nodded, his expression somber but resolute. "We did, but this isn't over yet. There's still work to do." The war wasn't won just by taking down one leader. It was won by showing the Vierxians that humanity wasn't just a pawn in their game. They had proven that Earth would not be easily conquered. They had proven that humans, no matter how small or fragile, could stand up to the mightiest forces in the galaxy. As they left the control room, Kara and Ethan exchanged a glance, one that spoke volumes. They had come a long way, from the strained relationship they once had to this moment of triumph. They had fought together and they had won together. And now, as they walked side by side, they knew that their bond had only grown stronger. When they returned to Earth, the world would know their names. But it wasn't fame or glory they sought, it was peace. The battle was far from over, but humanity had taken a step toward a new future, one where they would not just survive, but thrive. Ethan knew that the road ahead would be difficult. There would be more battles, more challenges to face. But for the first time in a long time, he felt ready. He was no longer the man he had been before, the weak human who had been mocked. He was a leader, a warrior. And alongside Kara, he would fight for the future of Earth, no matter the cost.